Teachers, parents and children across England are all currently waiting to hear when schools will start to reopen and how the transition back to school will be managed. There are important lessons to be learned from last year, when nationwide closures were followed by partial reopenings in June and July. How children cope with home learning during this period and how school reopenings affected this is relevant to both when and how the process should be managed this time around. To answer these questions, we surveyed parents of English school children, both at the height of the first lockdown in April and May, and during the phase of partial school reopenings in June and July. Previous research has shown that children spent a lot less time learning at the start of the first lockdown than they did before the pandemic, with daily learning time falling from around 6 hours a day to just over 4 hours a day for both primary and secondary students. Our research shows that children did not settle into home learning as the lockdown continued, as their daily learning time fell to even lower levels. These findings suggest that children lost out on a considerable amount of education during the pandemic. However, the amount of lost learning looks very different for children who did and did not go back to school last summer. Primary school children who returned to school saw their total learning time increase by 35 minutes per day relative to when all schools were shut. For children that were offered the choice to go back but chose not to, their total learning time was protected. Worst hit were the children who were never offered the choice to go back, who saw their total learning time decrease by around 40 minutes per day. These findings suggest that the longer schools remain closed, the more catch-up will eventually be needed. Last summer, the chance to return to school was largely determined by whether a child was in a priority year group. We do not find that schools attended by richer children were more likely to reopen. However, we do find that richer parents were more likely to choose to send their children back to school. Since these children got the largest learning time boost, we find that the partial school reopenings of last summer exacerbated learning inequalities between richer and poorer students. This time around, there has been a lot of talk about when schools should reopen. But our research shows that it is just as important to think about how this process is managed. Prioritising certain year groups is likely to widen inequalities between years, and making the return to school voluntary may widen gaps between better off students and their disadvantaged peers. However the return is managed, it is clear that the government must engage with local authorities, parents and schools to manage concerns and to ensure that as many children as possible are back in the classroom.